Everyone treats summer like it owes you happiness. Long days, pool parties, your best life on a loop. So what does it mean when you feel worse? The summer blues are real. It's why summer is one of the busiest stretches of the year for people starting therapy. Therapy is not only for when you're in crisis. Growth therapy is for all the moments when you decide you want more support, more clarity, more tools. Mental health isn't a destination you reach. It's something you build, and Grow makes that easier. Grow connects you with thousands of high-quality licensed therapists across the U.S., offering both virtual and in-person sessions, nights and weekends. You can search by what matters, like insurance, specialty, identity, or availability, and get started in as little as 2 days. There are no subscriptions, no long-term commitments. You just pay per session. Grow helps you find therapy on your time. The therapist you want takes your insurance on Grow. Grow accepts over 125 insurance plans. Sessions average $21 with insurance, and some pay as little as $0 depending on their plan. Visit growtherapy.com/booknow today to get started. That's growtherapy.com/booknow. growtherapy.com/booknow. Availability and coverage vary by state and insurance plan.
Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.
This is True Crime Cast. My name is Jamie. I'm here with John. How are you?
Dude, I'm doing good. How's it going over there?
Things are all good. We're a little bit of a new setup here, and we're trying to figure out the right levers to pull. But I think we'll be in good shape, and we got a great case for you guys today, a local-ish one.
Absolutely. Before we get started, I do want to say thank you so much to Kyle joining us over on Patreon, coming in at the $3 level, but took advantage of an annual discount. When you sign up for 12 months, you get I think 15% discount. Mm-hmm. So thank you, Kyle.
Yep, we really appreciate that. Also want to give a thank you to the newest 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts. This comes from Lethal Weapons, Leethal.
Oh, I like that.
Longtime listener, glad to hear you cover the Amy Bradley story. I grew up with Amy and Brad, and I know the family still misses and looks for her. Thanks for shining more light on this case. Signed, Lee. That case has come back up in the last several months with a new documentary, and our friend just released a new book on the case.
Yeah, well, awesome. Appreciate that. Anytime you leave a 5-star review, Jamie is going to read that on this episode. So thank you guys so much. Those really help out a lot. And again, thank you for our Patreon members. You had a new episode come up on August the 1st. And look, August is, a quarter of the way done already? I can't believe how time is flying. So it will be September 1st before you know it. But there's almost 10 years worth of content over there that is exclusive only for Patreon members. And you get our regular episodes a day early and ad-free.
Yep. Those are all new cases over there. And I just want to take a second, look up that book. It is called A Cruise to Nowhere by a friend of the show, James Renner. So that's recently debuted about Amy Bradley. And he does good work. So go check it out.
James feels like he's been a friend of the show for years. So thank you so much.
Yep. This is a case I've known about for quite some time. There's not a lot out there about it. And there are a lot of questions about what really happened here and what we know, what we think we know, and what we don't know. John, this is a story of the murder of Retha Welch. So why don't you get us rolling?
Yeah, in 2010, Linda Smith of the Kentucky Innocence Project wrote a letter to the Campbell Commonwealth's attorney, that's Campbell County Commonwealth attorney, asking for permission to perform DNA testing on evidence in the case of William Virgil. So this was just the start of an amazing journey through the courts and 3 different DNA labs. So let's rewind. On April the 13th, 1987, a coworker found the body of 54-year-old Retha Welch in the bathroom of her Newport, Kentucky home. If you're looking at a map of Kentucky, just go to the very top. You'll see Cincinnati, and Newport is right on the Kentucky-Cincinnati border. Retha was a devout Christian. She was a mother of 4, and she was a psychiatric nurse at a local VA hospital. She had been raped, stabbed 28 times, and bludgeoned to death with a vase from her very own home. She had met Virgil while she was ministering to inmates at a prison nearby. When I tell you this woman was a saint, she had lived a hard life. She had been through some stuff, but she was in a season of her life where she was giving back. She was very, very committed to a church, and then she was ministering in a jail to inmates. Virgil had been released from the prison just a few months before her death and admitted that the two of them had a sexual relationship. Now, I don't know if that last part is true, but let's get into what happened to Miss Retha.
Yeah, that was something that he admitted. And just to set the stage a little bit more, this is, again, right across the Ohio River from Cincinnati. And this area, once upon a time, John, was very much like the Vegas of the East. And it's hard to imagine that, but specifically northern Kentucky, across the river from Cincinnati, was a hard place to live.
I remember growing up, I would watch episodes of Cops every single week, and they often would feature Cincinnati on that show, and it was rough. And it's weird. I mean, there's, of course, still rough areas of Cincinnati, but for the most part, it is not at all what it was 40 years ago.
Right. Yeah. It has its problems like every city, but this is, it's a blurry line between northern Kentucky and Cincinnati. So,
even the Cincinnati airport is in Kentucky.
Literally. Yeah. It's wild. Let's talk a little bit more about William Virgil. At the time, he was living mostly in Cincinnati, about 8 miles away from Newport, and claimed he had no idea that Retha died, even though they arrested him for her murder 2 weeks after he was released from prison. He said he only learned about this when his parole officer mentioned it to him. There was a man at the time who was dating Retha. However, he said he saw Virgil outside the apartment days before her body was discovered, which put him, if not in the vicinity of the crime at the time that it happened, at least made it look like he was interested in being near Retha. Virgil's shoes and clothes had blood on them, but this was not enough for testing. And again, this is 1987. They weren't looking at DNA. If anything, they were going to be able to look and see, was this Retha's blood type? But there wasn't enough blood there to even check on it. Virgil's fingerprint was found on a lamp in Retha's apartment, and there was a bloody palm print on the wall, but that didn't match Virgil or anybody else that they were pursuing as a lead at the time. One of my least favorite leads for law enforcement is a jailhouse informant, but we had one come forward and say that Virgil confessed to him while they were sharing a cell together that he had killed Retha Welch. One of Virgil's former girlfriends also said that Virgil asked for her to help him do so. The prosecution alleged that Virgil and Retha had been sexually active and had somewhat of a relationship shortly before he killed her, again, shortly after his release from prison. In 1988, a jury found Virgil guilty, and he was sentenced to 70 years in prison. But since this is not a true crime to go case, you should know this story's only getting started.
Yeah, this is so sad, man. Retha was, again, just a saint of a woman. She met this guy in prison, and her pastor, kind of laid the rules for what a prison ministry was going to look like. And some of that was, you're going to be asked if you could meet with them to help them, and that's fine. You can do that, but you are only supposed to meet them here at prison, or if they get out of prison and they want to meet you, it is only to take place at the church.
Right.
But I think she had a big heart, and he asked if he could come to her house. And I think that's what got her in a lot of trouble, just not being wise as to where to meet with these people.
Right. And for him to be doing that, it obviously puts him in the crosshairs when she ends up being dead. He's just released from prison. He's not supposed to be around her, but we know that they were in some type of a friendship or relationship after he was released.
So the Kentucky Innocence Project was able to get Virgil a new trial in 2015. But it became clear that the DNA testing that they agreed to by the state was not going to happen. That's when Linda Smith filed a motion on Virgil's behalf requesting permission from the court to test it themselves. Well, that motion ended up being denied because Kentucky DNA statute at the time did not authorize DNA testing on non-capital cases. But there was a new bill that was introduced in Kentucky legislation, and that changed the statute to authorize DNA for non-capital cases. So now the road was clear for Virgil to prove his innocence. Later that same year, the Kentucky Court of Appeals vacated their initial denial of DNA testing and reconsidered the case under this new statute, and the testing was ordered shortly after.
Yeah, this is tough because I know everybody who says they're innocent says, let's just do a DNA test. And people think that that's the magic elixir that's going to tell us everything. But it is expensive. It's not CSI. It takes a lot of time. And people get upset when every request is not approved, but it's tough to get approved for a reason.
And the courts do have to be careful. They can't just give out evidence all willy-nilly. So there has to be some kind of balance. But even though it is expensive and timely, I feel like you almost have to. I mean, if you were convicted before this kind of testing came out and you were saying, if you check the DNA evidence, it will prove I'm innocent, I feel like there's a burden on the state to do that. Am I wrong? I mean, I don't know. It's tough.
What if everybody says that? And some people are going to say that just in the hopes of, hey, if this DNA has anybody else in it, then I can claim it wasn't me, even though I know it was. Like, I don't know. It's kind of a slippery slope.
You hope that we live in a world where there's only the smallest amount imaginable, close to zero, that are wrongly convicted, but we know mistakes happen. So I don't know. If I'm in those people's shoes and I know I didn't do something, I would be knocking on every door I possibly could.
And this is where we see people doing great work that the Innocence Project in Kentucky at this time is offering to pay for it. So whether that's through donations or funders or whatever it is expensive. I don't know that it's the burden on the state to pay for it, but I think the state should always allow it. And they don't even always do that.
I think if there's a happy medium, if I were in charge of Kentucky, I would say, yes, it can be tested. This is the lab that will test it. Here is the cost. If you raise the funds, have at it. We'll arrange for transport.
There you go. Will you consider being in charge of Kentucky?
Yes.
I'll allow it. So the labs received the evidence. And again, this was being paid for by the representatives of William Virgil. They opened the envelopes, and what they found was a rape kit and another envelope that was marked vaginal swab. However, those both turned out to be empty, which is obviously another big issue here. You mentioned not giving evidence out willy-nilly. Part of that is chain of custody issues, and part of that is, especially for DNA, it gets used up when you test it.
Yeah.
That's not what happened here. This just seemed to have been lost. It had already been used in some testing previously, but obviously it was not preserved for future testing, because the more advanced we get, the smaller amount of DNA that we need to do a test like this. So we need to be preserving everything, even if we assume there's not enough to test. But there was other evidence to test, and they decided that they would proceed with testing it, even though there was a big concern that without a rape kit, that they weren't going to get a new trial. Everyone had been losing hope until the Kentucky Innocence Project learned that there were slides made of the materials during the original testing process. They were able to get a hold of these slides, and slides usually 2 pieces of glass that preserves the makeup of whatever you're preserving between them. So they sent this to the lab. These tests showed that Retha had been sexually active with 3 different men in the days leading up to her murder. And again, sexually active doesn't always mean willingly so, because she was raped before she was killed. They were able to identify, though, the DNA of 3 different men, none of them of which were William Virgil. Wow.
Despite this finding, the prosecution still argued that hairs found on Retha might still belong to Virgil, thereby connecting him to the murder. Those hairs were in fact tested with mitochondrial DNA, and the results showed that none of them belonged to Virgil. So it was time for the state to admit that they did not have sufficient evidence to take Virgil to trial again. They were not going to do that, though. So they had one piece of evidence showing that Retha and Virgil had sexual relations in the past, and they claimed that this was proof that Virgil could have been the murderer, even though Virgil had openly admitted the two had been together in the past. The prosecution also argued that they were going to retry Virgil, and that he should be held on a $1 million bond before that trial. On December the 24th, 2015, the Campbell County Circuit Court ordered Virgil to be released from jail.
And these are always controversial decisions, whether it's Adnan Syed getting released and then probably not being retried to the prosecution wanting to hold Virgil back. You're going to make somebody mad with this ruling. But despite this ruling, the prosecution continued to have issues with their case, and the prosecution got more and more difficult to justify. One of the key witnesses in the original trial was a man named Joe Womack. And in 2016, leading up to the second trial for Virgil, Joe Womack recanted his testimony that Virgil had confessed to him in jail. A prison snitch saying he lied. This should be a drinking game, or we might be too drunk.
I wonder if, are there prison snitches that have actually been useful? If so, we need to cover those on cases, because I don't want to just be the guys that dismiss every prison snitch, but I dismiss most prison snitches.
Yeah, to be fair, we're not seeking out the cases where they end up recanting. They just happen to recant a lot. But in an affidavit that Joe Womack wrote, that then Newport police detective Norman Wagner had supplied him with the details of the murder, and that they were threatening to charge him as an accomplice to this if he did not testify against William Virgil. Womack says that the police chief paid him in cash ahead of his testimony, and that the prosecutor, whose name is Hoot Ebert, that's very eastern Kentucky, not northern Kentucky, he promised to write a letter in Womack's favor to the parole board. One officer did admit during his deposition that he had paid the jailhouse informant in cash. Womack told these investigators and a grand jury in December 2016, and they declined to indict Virgil on charges. Because at this point, they had shown that the hairs on the body were not his. The semen found on the scene was not his. And now the one jailhouse informant testifying against him says, I don't know what he's talking about. A few weeks later, all charges against Virgil were dismissed. In an interview, William Virgil was asked if he was angry, and he responded, "Why would I be angry? It's a waste of time." And that's a great outlook to have, John. I don't know if I could have that outlook if I spent over 30 years in prison for something I didn't do.
No, man, I know I couldn't. That would be agonizing to know that you're there for something that you didn't do. But remember, if he's in there for something he didn't do, then that means other people aren't in there for things they did do, right?
And there's no justice for Retha Welch, which is why we're talking about this.
He may not have been angry, but he did want justice. So in 2016, Virgil sued the cities of Norwood, Cincinnati, and Newport, as well as officers from all three of those departments for their roles in a joint investigation into the possible serial killer. It turns out Retha Welch was one of at least 3 female homicide victims in northern Kentucky, Cincinnati area in the early months of 1987. Officers from those different departments believe that Retha's death could have been caused by the same perpetrator. They had information that implicated other suspects, and they withheld it from Virgil and his legal team. So that is textbook, like, you want to close this case in any way you can. So by withholding that information, that set in the wheels this decades-long issue.
And again, I want to think that people have good intentions when they do this, that they thought, this is the guy, we need to make sure he goes down for it, so we're not going to share this. I could be wrong. I probably am, but I try to have optimism every now and then.
Well, I think it's good to give benefit of the doubt sometimes. So, I mean, I don't know where their heads were. That's how it appears at this time. So his civil trial was set to begin in last August in federal court. All the claims were dismissed except for the ones against Newport officers Norman Wagner and Mark Brandt. Records showed these officers did withhold exculpatory evidence relating to alternate suspects and also made pretrial payments to a witness.
Yeah, it's certainly not a good look regardless of the outcome. And obviously his convictions have been overturned. So now we're not even saying he's innocent. That seems to be factual. It's whether or not they did illegal behavior to show that. In 2021, the judge delayed the case so that these officers could appeal and that they could better prepare to defend themselves. He said that qualified immunity shields the officers from liability in a jury trial, which that is saying you can sue the city and the city can pay out, but we can't punish these officers for doing their job if they were doing it with the right intentions.
And how do you prove intentions? I mean, they do seem like they were doing their job. So you would have to be a mind reader to really know if they did it on purpose or if they thought that he was the person that did it. But I mean, really at the end of the day, what evidence was there to suggest that but they didn't have all this evidence at the time. So it's kind of a circular argument, right?
It's really tough to get to, but Virgil didn't have long to live. And that's the point his attorney made. He said this appeal was frivolous and that his client, then 69 years old and in poor health, may not survive a year-long delay. And that ended up being true, unfortunately. On January 2nd, 2022, just a few weeks before his 70th birthday, William Virgil passed away. His lawsuit had been in the system for 6 years, but was still pending with all the delays and appeals. His attorney said all William ever wanted was a fair day in court, and he never got that. The fact that William Virgil couldn't live to see justice is a reminder of how grave their misconduct is and how much they should pay for it. Virgil's cousin, Jerry Coleman, took on the case, standing in for Virgil as his personal representative. And Jerry would say that she's grateful her cousin was able to enjoy a few years of travel, to actually get out of prison to improve quality of life and spend more time with his family. But this lawsuit was always looming over him, so he was never really a free person. Said she's grateful he didn't die in jail, but he was never what she would call free.
In 2023, the case finally came to a close. Virgil's family was set to receive $28 million in wrongful conviction that had Virgil spending 28 years in jail for a murder that he did not commit. And to this day, no one else has ever been charged with the brutal murder of Retha Welch. And that truly is awful that her murder was never, there was no justice carried out for that. And $28 million to the family. I say this almost jokingly, but I wish I had an uncle that was in jail wrongfully so that I could get some of that pie.
Yeah, and I mean, who is able to accurately quantify lost time? Like, time is irreplaceable. Time is invaluable. You can go off lost wages, pain and suffering, and all those things. This ends up being about $1 million a year. So this is actually quite a bit higher than I think most individuals get when they do sue for wrongful convictions. But I'm sure he would trade every penny of that to have that time back with his family, as would the family of Retha Welch. I mean, we talked about it earlier. She was living a hard life early on. She was a recovering addict who had completely turned her life around and was doing a lot for the community. To be brutally killed in such a way and then have police get such tunnel vision that they never actually chased the truth to solve her murder.
And again, I mean, they didn't have the technology that we do today. So in their minds, this very well, this could have been the most likely suspect, because if it's a potential serial killer, we covered a case a few weeks ago, right, where the little girl was abducted by a stranger, and that's the hardest kind of case to solve because there's absolutely no connection to the victim. And most of the time, the people who perpetrate these violent crimes are people who know the victim. So I almost get, to an extent, why they looked at Virgil the way they did, but so many years later with new testing, it's completely tragic.
Do you think the definition or the outlook on reasonable doubt has changed over the years, in that here all we have against William Virgil is somebody said they saw her around her house in some point in the past, and a jailhouse snitch said he confessed to him. And that's pretty much it here. There's no physical evidence putting him there.
Yeah, I would say that.
There was a fingerprint found in the house. To be fair, there was a fingerprint, but he admitted he had been there.
Right. To be fair, like they're all, in my mind, if I'm on the jury, there has to be physical evidence. I mean, circumstantial, that's one thing, but if he left his keys or his wallet or, his hairs are definitely there, then that's one thing back then. But now the burden, I think, has gotten more strict because there are so many new ways to get physical evidence because of this more accurate testing.
Yeah, it's really tough to define, and I wonder, what is the burden nowadays? We're looking at some current cases. Like, I don't know if you're following the current Clancy trial, John, but the trial is not about whether or not that Lindsay Clancy killed her kids. It's what was her state of mind when she did it. So the law is this even like part of the trial? Is this to determine whether she's competent to stand trial? Yeah. So I didn't mean to completely pivot. Yeah. She's on trial right now, and she's in Massachusetts, and basically they're determining whether she was in a right state of mind to know she was doing something wrong. And the bar in Massachusetts to show that you're not liable for such action is much lower than it is in other states. You can go check out the prosecutor's coverage of this. They explain it a lot better than I can. But I bring that up to say the law doesn't change that often, but we also get into these cases where the interpretation of the law, or the fact that you're bringing in jurors who aren't experts in the law, like, I don't know. It's such an odd system. I have no suggestions for a better way to do law like we do in America, but it's, I don't know.
I think in some cases it comes down to which attorney is more creative in getting their version of the story out there. Because if you don't have a lot of physical evidence and you're kind of depending on circumstantial, then how compelling are you? That, I think, unfortunately, in cases like this back then, it could have come down to how good of an attorney do you have?
And yeah, that's absolutely the case. And a lot of times we get public defenders, not to say anything bad about them, but they're not as incentivized as prosecutors or private defenders can be. And John, we don't have a really good suspect following up here. I mean, we talked about the fact that they ignored other leads, but if you're ignoring other leads and somebody could potentially be a serial killer, I mean, you're opening it up for other people to potentially be killed out there.
Yeah,
so
if there's, especially if they were aware that this murder happened with a similar MO to serial killing, in the area, then yeah, they ignored a lot, but I don't know if that was the case or not.
The Accused podcasts out of Cincinnati, great series. Season 2 of that covered this case and kind of brought it back to light a few years ago so that people would be talking about it. And that was kind of in the middle of William Virgil's appeal and his or him seeking damages from the state. But even in that podcast and even in that deep investigation, there aren't a lot of good leads right now. And after 30 years, even with William Virgil getting exonerated and even with his family receiving this $28 million, I don't know how much time they're putting into finding the real killer. Now, they have this DNA from 3 males, And since we haven't heard of an arrest, I'm going to assume that didn't have any hits in CODIS. But
it also makes you wonder, like, is there still an active case? Are they actively working on this? So you would think that's what that means, but honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. I really hope so for her sake and for her family's sake, and
if the Kentucky Innocence Project paid for that, then does that mean that since it was not paid for by law enforcement, those results don't go to law enforcement if it wasn't a match on Virgil? Those are all questions that I would have for the lab and I guess the Kentucky Innocence Project.
I would think to enter it into evidence for the appeal, they would have to send it to the courts, and then it would be accessible to both the prosecution and law enforcement. I would think / hope that would be the case. And that should give you at least some places to start, some leads to go with. I mean, you assume one of those was her boyfriend who did testify in the case. You have to assume that one of those, I say you have to assume, you don't have to assume. One of those was not William Virgil. So there are 2 other people out there that we don't have the identity of. And as we've talked about extensively through genetic genealogy, there's a lot of room out there to make connections and to solve things like this. So I am still hopeful we can solve this thing. I do have concern that it's being pursued at the level that it deserves to be pursued. I'd hope that William Virgil getting exonerated would, I don't know, ignite a fire in the police department there to pick up on it, but maybe paying $28 million out of the city budget is not a good motivator.
Maybe. Guys, that's going to do it for this case. I want to say thank you for sticking around with us. I do pray that Retha Welch finally will get some justice, but we'll have to keep you posted on that. If there's any traction at all, we will keep you posted on updates in our monthly Patreon episode. So that's a good place to check out any updates from cases that we've done in the past. Also, this Wednesday, check out True Crime to Go on this channel. We're going to have a 20-minute episode about an operation known as mincemeat from World War II that's really interesting. And I'm kind of excited to talk about that one with you all next week or later this week.
Tomorrow even.
Sorry,
from
guys.
the time this comes out.
I don't know where I am or what I'm doing.
It's a lot, and that's something that you did the research on, so I look forward to finding out about Operation Mincemeat. It does not sound appetizing, but it will be mysterious and interesting, and we will be back for that on Wednesday, and we look forward to bringing you another case next week as well.
Guys, we appreciate you. We love you. And until next crime, this has been True Crimecast.
You've listened to True Crimecast, distributed by Stoveleg Media. Check out stoveleg.com to find out more about your hosts and to find other podcasts to listen to. Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.